So if you look at Zionism, a lot of people think Zionism is Judaism. They don't understand that Zionism is actually racism. It's anti-Semitism. Zionists actually hate Jews. Zionists have butchered Jews in addition to butchering Palestinians. So when you take a systems approach, you're able to actually make sense of the world. You can see when you take a systems approach, you start putting pieces together. Hey, Netanyahu, there was a civil war going on against him 3 weeks ago. People were protesting in the streets against him because they hated the guy. He's a fascist scumbag. Most Israelis hate him. And he was about to be ousted and thrown in jail. So that's one data point in the system. Then you recognize that data came out about 5 years ago, showing that in the Gaza Strip, in the Palestinian occupied territories, there's over 200 trillion cubic feet of natural gas deposits and close to 2 billion barrels of oil. Okay. And the Palestinians have been inhibited from getting that through all sorts of nonsense. So they can't be an independent people. So that's another data point. Then you find out that the United States financial system is collapsing. It's running on fumes. So it needs crisis to crisis so they can justify printing money. And then you intersect that with the fact that, as I mentioned, Zionism is racism. And in fact, it was the Zionists and Netanyahu and Mossad created Hamas to be the radical element that they could use as their controlled opposition against the secular forms of movements that were coming up within the Palestinians to create a secular, democratic, non-theocratic state. Israel is a theocracy, it's a Zionist political fascism that was created, which has nothing to do with Judaism. So when you intersect all that, what emerges out of intersecting those sort of 5 or 6 big pieces I just gave you, you put it all together and you connect the dots. What emerges is truth. The truth is this war in Israel is a much needed value for Netanyahu. It allows him to, like the Reichstag burning down by Hitler, consolidate power, tell people, okay, we're all quote unquote unified people against a quote unquote enemy. It allows the United States now to participate in a war to justify printing of money because the economy is actually tanking. If you look at the stock market and you watch it, it keeps going up. It's bullshit. The whole thing is nonsense. It's not based on any fundamentals. And then you look at the fact that people have become very clever at manipulating people psychologically. So people start feeling that there's nothing you can do, that the enemy's so enormous. And I think that's why they're showing all these killings and butchering on TV, including the destruction of Gaza, because mentally people start saying, I guess that's just the way it is. What do we do, right? And then people go into their hideouts of desperation. The good news is we can do something. We have to shatter the swarm. We have to destroy Zionism. We have to end a lot of this nonsense because none of it has to do anything that's pro-American values, human values. And we have a way to do that. Number one is people need to understand how systems work. Without that knowledge, and the elites, by the way, go to places like MIT and Harvard and they learn how systems work. And they use that knowledge to manipulate large masses of people. This is why the 0.00001% control 8 billion people. They have a knowledge base of systems understanding. Given I used to teach this at MIT, I decided that it's very important that this knowledge reach people, everyday people, because without understanding how systems work, people are always going to be, one day they'll vote for Obama, next day they'll vote for Trump, next day they'll think Bernie Sanders is going to save them, next day they think Tulsi Gabbard is going to save them, or Booby effing Kennedy is going to save them. They keep jumping from bed to political bed.
So that's one thing I loved about what you're saying. So if you guys are watching this and you're like, oh my gosh, you just said somebody that I totally love, look deeper into that person. Okay. I used to be a Trumper. I actually stood on the corner with my Trump flag. And then when he started talking about the vaccine and that people should be taking the vaccine, he talked about remdesivir. I was like, okay, wait a minute. I've been in the health and fitness industry for almost 30 years. And you don't take an experimental drug and expect it to help you with your immune system. And so when he was doing this, I started really questioning him. And also when Robert Kennedy, when he said that he wouldn't mind if the vaccines were mandated, or he thought it would be okay if the vaccines were mandated as long as they were safe. And I was like, no, you cannot mandate free people.
So we need to understand, the biggest thing people need to understand is that once you take a systems understanding, you start realizing in any system, in engineering system, your physical body is a system, any system, systems are based on achieving a goal. You want to achieve some type of health and well-being, right? You're using an autopilot in a plane. It has a particular goal to achieve a destination. So all systems have, intelligent systems have a goal. Non-intelligent systems just bumble around. They don't have goals. So it's actually two different kinds of systems. But intelligent systems, when they have a goal, there will always always be a disturbance that'll come to take you off your goal. And in the political world, the elites have figured out that before they used to just shoot people and annihilate people if you were opposed to their goals. But what they've recently done in the last 50, 70 years, they've created a cadre of the not so obvious establishment. People who literally say the things you want to hear, and this is their technique. And then you say, oh, Booby is taking care of it, or Tulsi Gabbard or Trump has got it under control. I don't have to be a citizen. I don't have to do anything. And then you realize that these people, this is a litmus test. Anyone who gets major mainstream media attention, positive or negative, is part of the establishment. And that's a very important thing to people understand. If you're watching Fox or CNN, whether the person's getting positive or negative media attention, they're the characters in a play, in a Shakespearean play. If you look at Trump is he's just a tool. I've met him. He doesn't know what the fuck is going on. He wanted to be an actor. You put the lights on and he'll do his acting gig, but he doesn't know what the hell's going on. He has no friends. All the people around him use him and he uses them. He may be a quote unquote a nice person, whatever you want to do that. He's not a good businessman. I know people who work very closely with him, and you look at his balance sheet, meaning you actually look at his financial statements, it's like $1 billion in assets and about $2 billion in debt. Okay. That means you have a negative $1 billion problem. Okay. So these people are made up characters. They have not lived your life, my life of building something, making something, inventing, innovating, having to actually work bottoms up. It took a lot of effort as a 14-year-old to create the first email system. It takes a lot of effort to create a company, bring together people, actually make something. And these people have no idea that they're all professional bullshitters. Booby fucking Kennedy he's a billionaire trust fund kid. He's never worked a day in his life. He can spit in police officers' face and get away with it. His family can murder women, dump them in Chappaquiddick, do all sorts of horrible things, and they're basically mafia. That's what they really are.
I just want to remind everybody that it controlled opposition. That's what we're talking about. Because if you can control the opposition, that the Republicans and Democrats are two wings of the same bird.
Now what they're creating is the uniparties so now they're creating fake independent movements. Our slogan since 2018 was declare your independence. So Kennedy steals our slogan. They know that our run for president has created a massive vacuum because we are really hammering people like Trump and Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders, who are the controlled opposition that is created so people don't build a bottoms-up movement. So Kennedy, who actually his people come to our meetings, they steal our content and literally repeat it word for word. The biggest thing is they stole our slogan, declare your independence. So he is now running as an independent, which is actually the fake controlled opposition against the quote unquote uniparty. So these people, the swarm, as I call it, itself evolves to learn how to manipulate people. I think what's valuable with what's going on with Gaza right now, Michelle, it's friends of mine who are Jewish and are anti-Zionist. They say when it comes to Zionism, there's no gray area. You have to be anti-Zionist if you're a human being. You can be a Jew, but it's like a very clear line. And that's what's going to separate the wheat from the chaff. So our slogan is, you want to talk about declare your independence, Booby? How about declare your independence from Zionism? He hangs around with the Adelsons, who are one of the most Zionist multi-billionaire family to get his money. You could argue that the elites want a war because 2008, when the bankers crashed the economy, Obama came and lifted them up. If it was true market capitalism, they should have all been thrown out of business. Yeah. And many of these bankers are Zionists, right? You have to acknowledge that. But Obama saved the Zionists on Wall Street. Yeah. And then what happens is in 2019, 2020, the economy was going to crash again because it's running on fumes. They just pump money in. And guess who comes save them then? Trump's job, he brought in Jared Kushner, who's Zionist Maximus, right? But this time, instead of people's eyes going towards the economy, they created this thing called the pandemic. And the pandemic was used so they could print more money. So if you remember, the stock market went down and then Trump brought it back up, that nice V, right? And again, the economy is running on fumes. So for the Zionist elites or the swarm globally, they need another crisis. So people don't put the eye on the ball on the fact that these economies are running on fumes. There's two types of Zionists. There's the Jewish Zionists, but the more potent ones in the United States are the Christian Zionists, these crazy evangelical idiots who they ask for money all day long, right? But they take the broad mass of poor white working class people and they convince them that we have to make sure we get back our homeland in Israel, all this rhetoric, which has nothing to do with anything Christ ever talked about. And the Christian Zionists are the ones that the Jewish Zionists use to get all the American public to support Zionism. And that was Trump's job. Trump, all of his messaging was aimed to control the Christian evangelical Zionists at the base level. And so it's very unfortunate because these are hardworking, poor people, white working class people who are being manipulated to support a fascist, racist. And by the way, Zionism is anti-Semitic. Very, very important.
Can you explain a little little bit more about what Zionism is? Because I know it's British
Yeah.
imperialists, but let people know exactly what is Zionism.
So I think it's really important that people understand the fundamentals, okay? And you have to go back to, again, study history, right? Which we teach people, truth, freedom, health, because without that, no one understands why you have to build a movement. People think, oh, you just vote for somebody and you should be happy you get the lesser of two evils. But if you study history, one of the things that people will discover is that in the 1800s and the late 1800s, there was a growing sentiment that there would be a major revolution, a workers' revolution of working people. And it was always thought of that workers' revolution would come in Germany because Germany had the most advanced industrial base there. People were tied to their factories. So anyway, that was what people are looking forward to. And that's, guys, people are looking that they knew there was going to be a workers' uprising in Germany. All right. So as a part of that, you had trade union leaders coming, right? People were organizing workers in factories, trade unions. A number of those trade union leaders were Jews, okay? Very intellectual Jews, some of them were from working class, okay? There were also the bourgeois Jews, okay? The financiers who lived in Europe and places like Germany, who frankly didn't give a damn about the working class Jews, or for that matter, anyone. And discrimination did exist, right? But we have to understand that the Jews in Europe and Germany had been there already 300-400 years. So how do you fight discrimination? The union leaders and the trade union leaders, they were saying, oh, that we're not going to run away somewhere. This is our land. We've been here for 300 years. We've contributed. We're going to fight here, okay? In a very progressive way, fight. The other trend that came up was a cultural nationalist trend. And I use the word cultural nationalism. It's a very important political concept, which is different than progressive nationalism. Cultural nationalism harks back to some olden days. Oh, I remember when we enslaved women in the good old days. Let's go back to those days. Or wasn't it great when we had slaves, right? It's a form of cultural nationalism. So that was headed by a guy among the Jewish cultural nationalist guy called Theodor Herzl, Herzl. And Theodor Herzl said, this is not our land. I want our own homeland, this concept. So let's all leave Europe. This was very similar to Marcus Garvey in the 1800s. And this was a thing in the ether about people trying to fight discrimination of Black people. Marcus Garvey said, oh, America's not our land. Let's go back to our homeland, Africa. And he actually got some ships and they went back to Liberia, forgetting that the African kings were also slaves. It's not like everything was peachy keen in Africa. And if you go look at the history of Liberia, the Blacks that went back from the US back to Liberia ended up becoming the most oppressive fascist people in Liberia. So cultural nationalism is not a solution to racial discrimination, okay? So Herzl manufactured this political ideology called Zionism, made it up, and he dug up some 3,000, 4,000-year-old reference. Oh yeah, thousands of years ago, we were over here and we deserve our homeland. That would be as ludicrous as the Vikings sitting in Iceland saying, oh, we're being discriminated. Yeah, let's go back to our original homeland, which was Vermont, because we were there, okay? Wow. And in fact, the Zionists had many congresses. In the sixth Zionist conference, the big debate was where would we go? And their number one choice at that point was Uganda, okay? East Africa. It's just to understand, okay? So it's a manufactured ideology. It's based also on the fact of the Jewish people are the chosen people and everyone else is secondary to that, okay? It's a racist model. In fact, a UN resolution was passed that Zionism is racism. And then the Zionists really got upset and they did all sorts of backroom deals to reverse that. But if you study Zionism, it is a political ideology. And another very important point people need to know, and you can do your own research, during World War II, the Zionists and the Nazis were one. They worked together. The great trade union leaders were Jews who wanted to build this bottoms-up movement. And you know who the Nazis butchered together? The Zionists and the Nazis. Many examples, like in the Warsaw Ghetto, where the Jews were wanting to fight Hitler and the Zionists disarmed, collaborated with the Nazis. So everyone needs to recognize Zionism is not Judaism. It may have like certain symbols, like the Star of David, just like the Vatican has nothing to do with the teachings of Christ.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
They may put the cross there, or the Brahmanism or the caste system has nothing to do with Hinduism. So all these religions hijack the teachings and then they morph it into something that benefits power, profit, control. And people need to recognize this. So that's why it's really disgusting that many of these Brahmanical caste people are promoting Zionism, because they're all in the same club, whether you're the Vatican, whether you're Zion, Zionism, whether you're the Brahmanical castist elites of Hinduism, you all are one, so you all support each other, right? Because it has nothing to do with the original teachings in any of these great religions, right? So that's what Zionism is. Zionism, the simple definition of Zionism is racism. Zionism is anti-Semitism that serves the forces of power, profit, and control. Global imperialism.
On a presidential question, how would you get the U.S. away from this new world
here
order?
are some simple things. No more dual citizenships. You cannot serve in government if you're an American citizen and an Israeli citizen. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And by the way, any U.S. citizen can participate in the Israeli army and fight, okay? So you can look at Anthony Blinken. His grandfather was critical to creating Israel. I mean, his whole lineage is Zionist. When he goes to, you'll see him hugging people when he gets off the plane much more warmly than he hugs people in the United States. Who are these people serving? This is who they're serving. And by the way, you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. Zionism is racism in the service of imperialism. Netanyahu is Satan incarnate. This guy is fucking crazy, all right? He was being ousted. By the way, there are Israeli people in Israel who are against Zionism.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So this needs to be understood. And there was going to be a civil war against Netanyahu.
And they don't care that they're killing billions of people. There's an agenda around this. And it's absolute evil is what they're doing.
Yeah. So this is no longer a war. This is about good versus evil. This is really about good versus evil. It's beyond anything you can imagine. And you look at a Netanyahu, you have to understand that it was Mossad. Mossad's thing is through deception, we shall win war. That's their slogan. That's their motto. Okay. Through deception. How the hell does these little paratroopers come into Israel? Supposedly have the Iron Dome. They funded hundreds of billions of dollars from the U.S. Hamas was funded by Israel, was created by Israel as early as 2019. Yossi Cohen, who's the head of Mossad, went to Qatar and told them to fund Hamas. Okay. The biggest opportunity here is for the American working people to rise up and destroy Zionism. Zionism is anti-American, it's anti-human, it's anti-Semitic. It has nothing to do with anything you would read in the core values of the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution. It's antithetical to all of it. And the only force right now that's sustaining, manipulating people on the ground level is a Christian evangelical Zionist. Go listen to those crazy fucking preachers. Nuts. These people are mouthpieces for Zionism. There's not like 100 solutions to this. There's only one, and that is we must build a movement. And the word movement has been misused by these same controlled opposition scumbags. A movement is actually a bottoms-up movement where people understand the dynamics of how the elites manipulate you. So that's the engineering piece. It has to have a very clear vision, truth, freedom, health. And then there has to be something that you do as an individual on a day-to-day basis. And that action can only occur in a decentralized way, one-on-one, locally. I've been fascinated by movements since I was a child. Since a 4-year-old kid, I studied all of them. And I ultimately came to the conclusion a simple flyer, printed flyer, handing out to people is a very powerful weapon. You may know on our website, to make this real, go to shivaforpresident.com and shivaforpresident.com. And you'll notice this is our website. On the right side, there's something called free downloads. This one-page flyer is the weapon on how to stop these people, okay? First of all, my run for president recognizes that elections are selections. They stole my election in 2020. We proved that. These guys don't even follow their own rules, okay? They're all scumbags. They do not want someone like me who actually comes bottoms up, who's earned everything I have, ever being able to win an election, because they have their boys, right? The Trumps, the Kennedys, the Gabbards, right? You can go down the list. But this flyer probably took me 40 years to do it. Let me tell you why, because I learned how to hand out flyers when I was a student at MIT. We used to create them. We started an independent newspaper, which was just a one-page piece of paper, and we would write different articles. It's a technology, actually. It's powerful.
One more thing. This is so great. You guys go to his website, shivaforpresident.com, learn more about this, because we do absolutely need a movement like this and people coming together. That's another reason why I was wondering about Trump a long time ago, because there's such division and we need to be unified.
Thank you, Michelle. I hope that was valuable, and it was great speaking with you. Thanks for the opportunity.